Yeah, so get my camera up, but I'm recording this. Other side of the screen is Dave Savage, the author of Agritopia book, great ideas. I've actually read most of it, but you know, Dave, since you and I started talking about doing this recording together, the USDA has come out with another program apart from their latest $12 billion bailout, $1 billion with a B bailout, which still isn't enough here in Arkansas for the average farmer. But their latest thing is $700 million for farmers to adopt what they call regenerative methods. But, you know, I started thinking for some reason under the surface that looked just like more business as usual for the government, which is promoting big ag over the local family farmers that communities have been built around. So, right off the bat, give me your thoughts on that program. And then my second question is going to be the one I really want to hear your opinion on, which is it time to just put the USDA out to pasture like we did the Department of Education?
Okay, Bailey. Well, thank you. And as far as the $700 million, I'm just burnt out on subsidies to farmers at this point. I've been in this business basically my whole life, started doing stuff when I was in high school, farming a little bit. And back then, there was always hope for production, and you did your thing based on capitalist principles. You kept your costs under control, and you planned for, you didn't know exactly what the market price would be, but somewhere along the way you usually got a little bit of profit in there, and we never got in this business to be rich. But that gone, here I am. I'm representing probably the half of farmers out there that are just sick and tired of all this government. So that $700 million comes in to try to design who the government wants to succeed and fail. Just like, we've done with all these subsidies. We've basically picked who succeeds and fails. And I'm going to make the argument in this whole thing that it has been designed for advantage scale. And we'd just all be better off if they weren't designing anything. And we let more of a free market economy enter agriculture and enter row crops again, and let this thing sort itself out. And if it takes getting rid of the USDA, maybe that's where we do need to end up. But I'll say this: a guy told me this yesterday. He said the USDA is probably a victim of a poor set of advisors. So they're getting advice from the biggest farm groups that really, I don't see that the biggest farm groups giving a rip about what happens in rural America. And what we're going to end up with, we're losing so much of rural America that they're not even going to have Republican voters out here anymore. We're getting to be such a small voting block because we don't have thriving rural communities. Excuse me for that. But here, let me put this on. But I am very, very not into any more subsidies, and I'm quite frankly not into this latest bailout that Trump did, because they lifted all the payment limitations to get out. They're going to be very large checks written to very big farms that will outcompete us for land.
Yeah. Um, it's funny. I have to kind of do these on my own now because it's hard to believe, but I think I got blacklisted from doing interviews after got one article published where I called for some things that people don't like, such as an immediate and indefinite moratorium on big ag mergers and acquisitions. I wanted a cooling off period from people going from political offices, bureaucratic offices to the boardrooms at big ag companies or vice versa. And, just throwing a name out there, you have Tyson, who former Tyson executive Justin Ransom is now in charge of the FSIS, which is the USDA's meat safety agency. And that's kind of why when I saw the $700 million plan, you know, it's a good idea. We want healthy food, make America healthy again. The RFK Jr.'s, um, what do you want to call it? His team over there trying to make this new policy. How much of that's being guided and written by the food cartels that have a monopoly over our seed industries, our fertilizer, our ag chemicals, our meat producing, et cetera, and they also have control over the eggs now, thanks to JBS and the Brazilians buying one of the biggest producers in the Southwest. So you actually can get canceled from giving interviews to say those things because Big Ag is the second biggest lobby in DC. They're only behind pharmaceutical. They're ahead of the defense industry. We're we're funneling money as fast as we can print it to Ukraine, and Big Ag still spends more money in DC to lobby. It's fascinating.
Yes, and I d- but big ag is. I look at this whole thing as the government is like a big old sow that just had piglets. And so she's got this whole long row of teats, and on those teats are big seed, big chemical, farm credits, farm creditors and banks, grain traders, processors, truckers, fertilizer, farmers, equipment manufacturers, and banks I mentioned again. So you got to believe that a lot of these bailouts, like this latest bailout, comes from exactly the big influencers that you're talking about that are behind, you know, that I mentioned banks a couple times, and I think they have a tremendous amount of sway on government. Who asked for these bailouts? I don't know any of my buddies that were asking for another bailout.
Yeah, we
You know,
had back
what it does is kind of bails out stupid. Go ahead.
back in September, we had this big meeting here in Arkansas, and I kind of heard about it at the last minute and went, and it was a bunch of farmers talking to some representatives, some elected officials, field representatives about how they need bailouts. And it turned out that entire meeting was hosted by a bank. Yeah, they
So,
wanted it still so they can get their interest payments. That's all it came down to.
and the banks know that this injection of capital by government turns into being capitalized into all of our inputs, in particular land. Land everywhere is about 3 times what land will cash flow from. I know the Midwest from Ohio to Iowa pretty well, and I can tell you all of these land values, they don't make sense. I mean,
Yeah.
you know what the regular working guy out here can't understand about ag is how can land in the middle of no development area Iowa be bringing $20,000 an acre? And while the farmers are saying they need bailouts, but I'm afraid, in a way, it ain't a lot of us farmers saying we need bailouts. It's the people who are running Congress that are asking for the bailout. And we need land to go down in price because that's our biggest operating expense is land. And the banks are scared to death of rewriting all the balance sheets and that. So how do you fix all this? It's complex. How do you fix it? And I say you I referenced the sow analogy. Well, you can't just go in and shoot the sow. Like, Reagan, in essence, tried to do that in the 80s when he had the Farmers Home Administration foreclosing on, what they perceived as, risky accounts. And then it crashed all the land values, and then it became a self-serving problem. So we can't go shoot the sow. What we have to do is wean the piglets. I'm not saying we're pigs, but we have to start the
I am.
system. And that's where I go toward the hybrid farm savings account, which is a concept that that's really the reason I wrote that book, is to pitch a different concept and call for reform. So I respect what you're saying about ending the USDA, but I'm saying maybe we could try reforming the whole philosophy of farm programs before we, terminate the USDA like the Department of Ed.
Yeah, break down the hybrid farm savings account, what it would be, what it might look like. I mean, someone like the Small Business Administration, the SBA, they probably love it, but then someone at the USDA might not. But, at this point, I think if you're getting pushback from the USDA, then it's probably a good idea. So, explain what it would be, what it would look like, how it works, and why somebody should prefer to have it.
Yes. Okay. So since I wrote that book, I had to go to DC. I got invited by a good group of ranchers, basically. That so I spent 3 days and 3 to 4 days in purgatory there in DC, and I got to a meeting with the USDA. Believe it or not, they let us in, and they actually latched onto that HFSA idea, which is, I call it the hybrid farm savings account. It's not the first time a savings account's been proposed for the farm, but this idea has a unique uh, hitch to a tax play. So let's go to what is the farmer's biggest tax play would be called the 179. So if I made money this year, the tax guy says go out and get a tractor or something. You can get rid of some of this cash that you're going to be taxed on by buying a piece of farm equipment or a barn or a grain bin.
There you
So
go.
yeah, so that's been a biggest tax play forever. What I'm saying now with the hybrid farm savings account, the reason it's a hybrid is that let us have half the 179 to put in to a savings account for the farm so that we can become our own rainy day fund and not reliant upon government subsidies and government ad hoc programs and totally on big crop insurance. I'm saying let us design our own savings account, which brings everything back closer to realville. And so we don't have as much of a false economy. Okay, so then as you get older in this hybrid system, you as you get older, that could also be a retirement account. The farm takes so much capital outlay that a lot of us aren't putting into 401ks or IRAs and stuff like that. So that becomes our retirement account when we get old. Hopefully, there's something left in it. But this system is really copying what we have in the health system with the HSAs. So I didn't reinvent anything when I proposed this about 8 years ago. I went to DC on my own to try, and I wrote that up in the book of in how fruitless that trip was. But I always worry whenever I've been in DC that the minute I walk out of an office or someone else that I'm with walks out of the office, the next guy in is carrying an envelope full of cash for the campaign reelection fund. So anything that I said as a voter or a constituent or as a member of a rural community just gets washed away by that envelope full of cash that comes in behind me. But the DC, so we've got DC people that have heard about this hybrid farm savings account. And I know the USDA liked it, and I know the SBA liked it. But a quick story on the SBA and the USDA. They asked me for follow up. So I do follow up. I do emails. And then they must put me on this do not answer list because after a little bit of communications, you don't even get a reply from them. And so it almost seems like there's someone behind the scenes that's telling them, no, we do not want a saving systems for farmers. Now, who's doing that? I I believe they have some good intentions for the farm and want us to be independent of these programs, but they aren't setting us up that way. Very frustrating for me.
Either banks or farm credit.
I
Let's see.
say you're right. You know, and I don't know that Farm Bureau has helped us a whole lot in that regard. I think they have the potential to do a lot more for us, but I don't see them stepping up to the plate. I had the whole, I went through that whole grassroots thing with the Farm Bureau to try to plug this because Chuck Grassley told me that's where you need to go. You gotta lobby the Farm Bureau. You gotta get the land grants to back you up and write an evaluation of it. And so I tried that whole process, but I figured out the grassroots process, whose grass's roots do they want to water? It wasn't for us being independent entities on these farms. They seem to want our codependence with government. And that's very un-American.
If you look at American Farm Bureau, the what they call themselves, the voice of America's farmers or something like that, it's a lie. If you if you could do a deep dive into their investments, what companies they invest in, you'd realize really quick they're lying to us all because, say there's 4 companies that control our fertilizer production. One of them's private. Farm Bureau at one point was heavily invested in the other 3.
Hmm.
A lot of money tied up in those companies getting bigger. I think at
Yeah,
one point, Farm Bureau, I don't wanna say this, I think I saw at one point they were a big investor in John Deere,
yeah,
among, several banks, um, several chemical companies. Yeah, Farm Bureau, they make their money not so much off of selling insurance. The insurance is a front for them as far as I'm concerned. That's a cover operation. They make their money off of their investments in these other big companies, mega companies. They control our food supply. I know it sounds like a conspiracy theory, but at some point you start tracking the dollars and you start realizing all these people are connected.
well, and one thing, if a congressperson is listening here, I know they're very influenced by Farm Bureau's lobbying efforts, but just beware that, they we all have to become members because a lot of us have insurance through Farm Bureau, and we have very good local people that work for Farm Bureau in the insurance world. And so with them, they get our membership, and then they go to Congress, like, and they represent us, but no, they're really representing their own business interests, not rural America. So that's a real trap that the congressmen seem to fall into, and that's probably, like the one fellow said, that's the advisor to all these programs is coming through these, and sometimes our checkoff funds, I suspect, are doing the same type of thing. I would like all checkoffs to be voluntary because they shouldn't be a mandatory tax on the farmer. And a lot of times we're not very well represented by our checkoff dollars either. So, I mean, that probably getting into too big a broad scope. I hope we've done a little bit of fair service to explaining the hybrid farm savings account concept. I don't want it to replace all investment potential for your grain bin company or for John Deere case, or the pole barn guys, whatever. But I say we shouldn't just be putting our good years into a piece of equipment. We should be able to put it into our own savings account and build our own rainy day funds, and get that tax play.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, here's Senator Tom Cotton from good old state of Arkansas on Twitter or X. Thank you, Arkansas Farm Bureau, for visiting DC this week to share the many concerns of farmers across our state. I'm proud to work with you to ensure that farmers and ranchers have the support they need to continue their work and way of life for generations to come. All he means is how much money the government can give. And while we're at it, to ensure that farmers and ranchers have the support they need. Are our
Hmm.
government policies helping row crop farmers and ranchers at the same time?
That's a big problem. Okay, so government policies, and let's not forget to mention CRP as one of those government problems. They are the bulk of the reason why we have a record low beef herd. I think 70 years it's been since beef herd's been this small. What year? Yeah. So okay. So what happens is in our neighborhood is a good example. There are this is really cow calf country. I'm in the worst land in Iowa, and so we are really our cow calf country. And row crops have their role here. And we got to feed the cattle herd. But what has ended up happening is we've turned cow calf country into row crop country because the highest dollar that can be achieved out of that acre is through crop insurance. Crop insurance is the elephant in the room that dictates that that acre goes to corn or soybeans and not to cattle. Number one. So you have that conversion of all these pasture acres into row crop. Number two, you have the government come along and they've taken about 20 million acres out of production that, and a lot of times is the more marginal acre that was the acre for the cattle. So then what do? Then they compete with row crops to get that acre out of production. This is an area where $200 rubs up against top cash rents. Okay, so then the government comes in, pays $240 for CRP to get it away from row crop, and the cattlemen are sitting there getting beat out by these CRP acres like crazy because the average pasture rental rate around here now is about $100 an acre, half of row crop. Of course, a lot of these acres that can get signed up for CRP are going in there. That's why we call CRP the cow replacement program, or constructing rural poverty, whichever one you prefer. But that's and here I go to that DC meeting, and I throw to them an idea for those CRP acres called Operation Ranch, where we take those CRP acres and make the government and their landowner have to accept public hunting on those acres. But if they don't want public hunting, then they have to accept that a farmer, a young or a veteran farmer or rancher gets access to grazing those acres. So it's basically a program. First of all, I'd love to see those acres just stop, but they can't come into row crop production because then in an already overproduced economy, we can't take them. So why not go back to their more native use, and the government would, it's complex. But the USDA people in DC, when I threw that Operation Ranch in front of them, they're like, send us that. Send us the HFSA, send us Operation Ranch. We're looking for these kind of ideas. And then the track goes cold. It's a weird phenomenon. Same thing happens with the SBA. So who's running this thing?
And that's a hard one to figure out because, okay, CRP is the stuff that doesn't produce very well. It's more or less not worth it for the farmer to try to grow his crops on it. Cows are Mother Nature's fertilizers.
Mm-hmm.
That's all they do. They eat what grows. They refertilize the field. They track it up. They knock holes in it. You get better water penetration. They dump their own fertilizer all over it, so it grows better after you graze on it for a while. Why would we not want that to make this subpar land, bring it up to standard with the land around it? Why do we not? That's to try to throw a conspiracy at that one. I can't figure out why or who would be behind stopping that one.
Yeah,
that one kind of.
There's so many. There's 20 million acres of opportunity here to grow the cattle herd that needs grown. It's a native cattle herd that we should have. I mean, basically, the buffalo were doing it before. Now we have cows doing it because it's what's made sense for humanity.
Yeah, it's one of the weird things, and I would love, we have congressmen talking about, Thomas Massey's Prime Act. Harriet Hageman in Wyoming. She wants to bring back mandatory country of origin labeling. That's a pretty straightforward issue on its own. Grazing CRP seems even simpler to solve. That seems like something we could solve. I've never written a bill for DC. I could probably figure this one out.
Can you start writing then? Because they can't write in DC. They wait for someone else to write it for them.
And I would love to see this one get on the floor, just like mandatory country of origin labeling. We can get on that one too. But I would love to see your Operation Ranch plan, graze the CRP. Let's get it to the floor and at least find out who votes against it so we can ask them why.
Yeah.
What's harmful? Why are we stopping it? And if that's one of the USDA shouldn't need a bill for that. CRP is a USDA program. They should already be asking these questions. If they had any advisors worth of crap, they would already be asking this publicly. Why are we not already allowing it?
Yeah, and there's so many more things involved in trying to tamper with the natural economy. It even comes down to they release hay out of CRP. So many years they say it was droughty enough that we release hay. So all of us who have a legitimate hay field on a most sensitive ground have to now compete with $30 a bale CRP crap hay coming into our market. It's all these false economies that the government creates. We got to get away from this, people. And sometimes I think CRP was dreamed up by some congressman that decided, I don't really want to have to deal with a local farmer. I'm going to deal with the government for 10 years. It could be considered one of those golden parachutes for the retirement government officials that had farmland, is just put it in CRP. I don't know if how it got drained up, but
my other question with that is, I want to ask this, and I don't have an answer. I know you don't have an answer. I just want to throw their name out there. National Cattlemen's Beef Association, NCBA. They're funded, I think, entirely or at least almost entirely by the checkoff money that you mentioned that right now is mandatory. They should be the ones making this case to the USDA, in my opinion. Why are they not fighting for it? Because they're too busy trying to get Mexican beef across the southern border.
Well, okay, I was in a beef group and I proposed that we get rid of CRP. What I didn't realize, because I didn't do enough homework, was that the ranchers love CRP because there's something called grassland CRP that it looked like they were getting around $18 an acre to not do a whole lot, but just say that I'm going to keep this in grassland. So I realized that the row crop guy and the rancher guy might have a different perspective on CRP. So that might be why your cattlemen's groups don't want to touch CRP, because they got this pretty good sweetheart deal going with past rangeland CRP program. But it's the cropland side of that has helped create such a problem in the cattle herd. And definitely a problem in the cattle herd if you go into the Dakotas. I was at a wedding one time and I saw this big burly dude with pearl snaps and hair coming out of the top of his shirt, and he had hands the size of pitcher's mitts and a catcher's mitt, and he goes, I said to him in the food line, can the cowman and the farmer be friends around here? The row crop farmer and the cowman, can they be friends around here? And he goes, if you want to know the truth, no, they can't. Because what's happened so much in the Dakotas would be row crop and crop insurance outcompeted the cattle for that land. So, that's happened. That was all those years. All my buddies would say, we'd see the acres of corn and beans go up every year through the 90s. Once revenue crop insurance came out, those acres just started blooming. Well, it's obvious that they could lock in more revenue from a corn and soybean, whether or not they grew good or not, it didn't matter. And so the subsidies the indemnity payments, if you look at a map of indemnity payments, they're often going to those northern plain states. That's a big area that we're paying for, and they don't, their rates for their subsidized crop insurance rates to put that land into row crop is not commensurate with the amount of risk they're taking on. So rates don't reflect risk, and that's another false economy, and that's why cattle lose out.
Well, if we went my way and got rid of the USDA, no competing programs.
And I was informed along the way that actually crop insurance was created outside of the USDA by some congressional act, so that it's got a separate of function of the USDA. But I really don't understand all that. But going back to the NCBA issue, I just feel like a lot of times, like the NCBA hasn't backed us on mandatory country of origin labeling.
Mhm.
There all of our checkoff dollars end up going to the NCBA. So then we have a group that doesn't believe we should label our cattle, product of the USA versus product of Argentina or whatever. Then why are we giving them our checkoff dollars? So let the checkoff be voluntary.
You'll probably get further with that than you would, you know, I know some groups want to get rid of checkoffs altogether. Okay, that's a bigger road to hoe. I think you're better off trying to make them voluntary. I'm all for it.
Yeah.
And it's not just them. It's if you go to the grocery store, there's probably some kind of board or association for whatever produce you look at that gets checkoff money. I mean, here in Arkansas, there's a soybean association. Every farmer pays to the American Soybean Association when they sell. They pay to the state when they sell. And some states actually allow a refund of the state checkoff money. I don't know if Arkansas does. I've got to look into that. But yeah, people talk about farmers always needing handouts. They don't realize how much money farmers have to just give away because the government said so.
Yeah.
It's one of those fascinating things. The further you go down this rabbit hole, the worse it looks. And when those groups that get the checkoff money don't even fight for American farmers, they fight for, say, let's go after the NCBA because they're my least favorite of all the checkoff organizations. When they fight for South American or Central American beef instead of American beef, they fight for, what do we do right now? The product with the USA label. I can go to my local grocery store, all of them. Everything is going to be a product of the USA, which all that tells me is that they wrapped it in plastic somewhere north of the southern border. I don't know where it was grown. I don't know where it was killed. I don't know where it was processed. All I know is they wrapped it in plastic in the USA, and it got a USDA stamp. I
Yeah.
think we're voluntary next year, but we had mandatory country of origin labeling. We got rid of it because Canada complained.
Yeah.
Bring it back and make Canada complain again. I like it. I like it when Canada complains. It amuses me.
Yes, and I think we have the right administration in office right now that should be doing that kind of thing. And when Trump went out there, making the deal with Argentina, bringing, it might have been only 2% of our beef, but our beef group went to DC and said, then label it. If you're going to do it, at least give us that. It's basically, we'll give you that inch of the Argentina beef coming in, but give us that mile of labeling so the consumer knows. The only two commodities that don't have product of origin labeling, mandatory country of origin labeling, are beef and pork. Fish, macadamia nuts, all fruits and vegetables, they have country of origin labeling. But beef and pork, because the big integrators don't want to have to expose where they're getting all their product from,
Yeah.
which comes down to the foreign ownership of these large packing industries is a danger to food security. And so, we also have the right administration in here right now to take care of that too. I don't believe that over 25% of our production capacity should be in foreign ownership because of a national security threat. But we should do something with that with the guys we have in office right now. And the Republicans, for some reason, can't even go along with us on mandatory country of origin labeling. They hide under the WTO thing that you mentioned. And it's like, when have you last heard of much power out of the WTO? I don't think they should rule over us.
Well, in 2015, it was the Republicans that actually, I think they led the charge by, it may have been by 1 or 2 votes, but it was Republicans that led the charge to do away with mandatory country of origin labeling. It's just that President Obama was still in the White House, so I'm sure they had pressure from there. As I supported the current president, I still do. I mean, I think for the most part, he's had a good first year in his second year in office. There's some things I don't like that I wish they would do differently, but he's still got 3 more years to go. I'm, you know, I wish they would hurry up on this one. I really do, but I'm willing to give them the benefit of the doubt as much as I want the USDA to go away. I still think there's a chance for them to do some good. And country of origin, mandatory country of origin would be the first step it wouldn't take long. We've already had it. Hey, let's just repeal that time that we repealed it and bring it back. If the Republicans in office would do it while they still have a majority, I think it would pass first time, House and Senate.
Well, throw your voters a bone, Congressman, especially you Republicans. But, when we were in D.C., the Republicans were the most resistant to this. So you have to look at why would they be resistant to mandatory country of origin labeling, which is a slam dunk for rural America. Well, the reason they would resist it is because whoever's coming in that office behind us had an envelope full of money. And there's a problem with campaigned reelection funds. And this is running our Congress way too much. The money, in the book, I put the public information out on one of our congressmen's that how many they had 100 pages of or 96 pages of donors at 100 donors per page. Now my math says that's 9,600 donors. You didn't get to the $35 tightwad guys like me until the last few pages of those donors. There were plenty of $10,000, $20,000 donations that are coming in to get the campaign reelection funds. This system can't work. Something has to change. But we got to remind all of our congressmen that it wasn't those dollars that elected them. It was the voters that elected them. It was we, the little people. So we have to get our share of representation. But it goes back. The people in D.C., the smart young kids, will all tell you, well, the Supreme Court said that dollars are votes, and I just have so much trouble with that. It's like, no, that's not the way America should work. Even though you guys think that's the way America works, you didn't check your soul at the door when you went to D.C. to work for the people. I don't know how you bring this back around to fair representation in America. It's a big American problem. It's more than just agriculture's problem.
Well, if you look at beef specifically, I'm going to give Farm Action just a little bit of credit here for this. But specifically with beef, you have Tyson controls 20 to 25% of the beef processing. JBS controls 20 to 25% of beef. Cargill controls 15 to 20% of beef. Name the three. Oh, National Beef is 14%. They're actually owned by JBS through some backdoor subsidiaries. So we have three. Let's just assume we have Brazil, Cargill, and Tyson Foods. They control at least 80% of the beef processing of the beef that comes in here. A pound of ground beef, 80/20 is $9.99, maybe $8.99 if you get it lucky at the store. Where do they make the most money from? It's not from buying buying local feeders, turning them into fats, butchering them here in America. In Nebraska, where they shut down a plant, the money comes from the South American beef. They
Yeah.
grow it. Those cows spend their entire lives in a feedlot, and then we kill them, process them, send them up here, wrap them in plastic, and all of a sudden they're a product of the USA. And
Yeah.
those big companies are donating. I mean, JBS, the Brazilian meat company, was one of Trump's biggest inauguration donors. And I like the guy, but he should be called out for having that donor. He really should.
Well, and so much of this gets corrected by mandatory country of origin labeling. The voluntary country of origin labeling that we're going to get, who's going to volunteer to label it? It's
And
not
who's
going to happen.
what were we?
So, mandatory country of origin labeling, people, this is something we need to slam dunk. We
Yeah.
have to get it back.
And the sooner the better, in my opinion.
Yep.
So let's see. We got HFSA. We got, I think we tackled the mandatory country of origin labeling, Operation Ranch, CRP. Any other issues that you know of off the top of your head that really should be addressed?
Yeah.
USDA, or I don't even go by the lobbyists. They're worthless. Most of the agricultural advocacy nonprofits are worthless. I had to start my own just because the others suck so bad. Farm Action's research over here that I'm skimming through, give them credit. It's really great. I know the people that put it together. So yeah, there are some good things out there, but at the same time, the people that go to DC, they get photo ops and come away with nothing. I don't want to go to DC because I'm pessimistic enough to know the same thing. So let's just hash out the issues right here. Anything else we should cover?
Well, and you mentioned your skepticism over what goes on in DC. I witnessed something that was amazing. A group of on the ball ranchers that I was with, laid out their case, and you were talking about the disparity in meat prices between what we receive and what's at the grocery store. And the consumer's getting beat up and all that. The farmer's getting beat up a little too here. But there's a lot of retail and packing things that are a mystery in between there. And these ranchers, three of them walk in to a DOJ meeting, and they get the DOJ to investigate this whole thing. Again, the DOJ's been down this road before, but they're going to look at it again. So that's impressive. But may I step back a minute into this latest payment?
Go for it.
And tell you what's happened. I have a website, and in my website, I expose a loophole for payment limitations. So we come out with this $12 million bridge payment for farmers, and I checked in with the government to find out, well, what's the payment limitation going to be for this? Because the payment limitation was supposed to be something that the intent of the farm program was supposed to help a lot of the farms, not just a few of the farms. So I found out after I wrote the book that there was something called the GP loophole that's been existing for let's say 10 years or better. But it
At
is
the general partnership.
You got it. The general partnership loophole. I want to tell you, it's no longer a loophole. It was solidified in the big beautiful bill. So now what you have is the only organization of a farm that is going to experience a payment limitation is the sole proprietor. Okay, so then if you have a family farm, which 96% of farms are family farms, but I avoid the use of family farm because that's a structural setup that allows for multiple partners to get a new payment limitation. So when a lot of us don't realize that the FSA office is writing checks to one enterprise or one entity for over $1 million for these payments, because there's enough partners in these farms now, the way they're structured, that they're going to get. And that's why when you go on the Environmental Working Group website, you'll see multiple millions of dollars worth of subsidies going to an individual farm. And now, by the way, the USDA is trying to hide the biggest takers of those subsidies. They won't expose the names of those anymore. But this, so let me go to this analogy. So everyone's wondering, well, why are these mid-sized farms struggling so bad? Because the mid-sized farm is the one who struggles the worst right now. And that, I'm going to identify, I'll use USDA as the $1 million down to $350,000 size frame of gross sales, 350 to $1 million. That's the size farm hurting the worst. And so let me set up the way the gig is working right now. The crop insurance is up to 90% on most of our row crop products. They've gotten it ridiculously high to 90%. So now we're all paying land rents and paying land costs to compete in that arena. So now we all produce the commodity for near break-even price. There's not a lot of margin in it. So if we're all competing at break-even price, the small farmer who goes to that FSA office comes out of there. He might have another job in the family. As he comes out of there with an envelope full of money out of the FSA office. The mid-sized farmer, he comes out of there with a wheelbarrow full of money. The multiple partnership farm, he comes out of there with a semi-load full of money. Now, who's going to be the economic powerhouse in that area with those dynamics? Now, yeah, more acres, more payments, whatever. Here's what ends up happening to the mid-sized farm. They're big enough. They have to have two people at least farming that place, husband, wife, maybe kid. So they don't have that off-farm income. So family living costs come out of that wheelbarrow. Family living costs by the little guy the littler farm might be taken care of by an off-farm income, but that middle class farm is the one that's suffering. And man, they are the foundation for a lot of our communities because they are doing a lot of the volunteerism, keeping the fire departments going and everything. And we're losing our rural America because we're losing that class of farmer. So these big guys, they're really out competing us. And it's not because of their efficiency. On page 26 of my book, I lay that out. They're making the biggest hits on crop insurance. You can prove that they are not the most efficient model. The bigs are not the most efficient model, but they are the best at harvesting subsidies. And that is un-American.
So what's more likely to happen? Should we do away with it's not a loophole, it's been codified, be hard to get rid of now. Should every farmer take advantage of it then?
Say, I really can't blame any farmer for playing in the game. And that's why I'm doing all this. So the conservative or Republican farmer, please quit trying to justify these subsidies. Quit saying it's cheap food policy, it's this and that. It's enough to say that you have to take them to be competitive in the business because that's the way the government has set up the business. It's enough to say it, but call for reform. So what type of reform do you ask for as a conservative or a Republican? What type of reform should you ask for? And this is where I go back to that sow analogy. The reform has to be a weaning process away from subsidies and onto self-reliance. And honestly, I think the best way to do the self-reliance thing is through the savings account concept. I wish if there's a better way, please tell me, Bailey. I'd love to hear it. But
I don't know. I mean, say your average crop farmer spend 40% of their spending every year outside of land is just on fertilizer. So, yeah, to have a self-reliant system, we've also got to do something about those rising costs and the consolidation that's causing those costs to rise. I mean, this $12 billion plan, I'm not going to say his name, but a fertilizer trader from StoneX, that's probably saying too much already, actually said that as soon as that $12 billion plan was even talked about, before it was officially announced, um, the fertilizer companies were already projecting price increases
Hmm.
because they knew the money was going to be there no matter what it costs. The money is going to be there for the farmers to buy the fertilizer next year. So
Yeah.
we've got to get rid of that system too, where the government is laundering money from farmers to mega companies that produce these goods that they need to grow. We've got to do something about that system. We got to encourage farmers, one, to quit over fertilizing all their fields. But I'm not saying they should all go organic or all go full on whatever they want to call regenerative farming. But we do need to get rid of that system where the government is helping these companies raise their prices every year.
You know,
And if you can do that, then all of a sudden you do have the framework and you have an environment where your HFSA could take a big hold. But we
and
don't anything that resemble we don't even resemble a fair market right now in what they pay for fertilizer, seed, or chemicals. I mean, it used to be they pay too much for diesel. Now it's actually sort of reasonable.
yeah. And okay, so going down that path with fertilizer, I mean, this was just an issue this morning with a buddy. And we look at our soil tests, and if we're sporting a 50 part per million on phosphorus and a 150 part per million, or excuse me, a 25 part per million in phosphorus and a 150 part per million in potash, let the fertilizer companies eat their fertilizer. I mean, we don't need to put it on. And there's so many people that have those kind of soil tests where you can grow near 95th percentile of row crops. It actually, this price thing should fix itself, because I already know there's a lot of guys that aren't running P&K or very much. So, and hopefully that gets into national yield a little bit, because we got to bring national yield down. We have this oversupply philosophy that's all baked into the system. So I'm really kind of hopeful that these fertilizer prices will solve some of the supply oversupply issue of
I hope so.
grain.
I hope so too. Here in Arkansas, we I live in rice country. I'm surrounded by rice fields. I mean, but here in Arkansas, we went hybrid rice because of the yields. You can yield more and more every year. For the last 2 years, the quality of the harvested rice has been so bad, it's been hard to sell.
Hmm,
Farmers are still on to 2024's rice, looking
interesting.
for a market to sell it in because we
Mm,
chase yield.
yeah.
Meanwhile, India is subsidizing what 99% of their rice, growing it as cheap as possible so they can sell it. No, 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 we don't want their rice. Let's grow our own. Let's just grow higher quality stuff here. Quit chasing yields. I'm all for it.
And quit begging foreign countries to buy our stuff. I mean, we we have a problem with always begging China to buy. I really wish our yields were just lower across the board, and we didn't need to chase the foreign markets as much. Take care of our own livestock needs in this country, our processing needs.
Well, yield, if we're going to keep chasing yield, let's quit adding more acreage every year.
Yeah,
Grow
that
crops.
yeah, and crop insurance is what secured all those extra acres. And okay, I need to go back to the hybrid farm savings account, because I forgot a very key part of this. It's dummy me, but is to take catastrophic crop insurance out along with that account. So in healthcare, so the model that we use, that healthcare has, is you buy a catastrophic health care policy, but you do most all of your expenditures for medicine actually come out of your health savings account. And that's what I see for the farm. So what you're doing with catastrophic crop insurance is you're complementing that with your hybrid farm savings account. So if you do get into a really bad loss, let's say we go, what I would foresee is about 55% crop insurance. I'm not in the government programs. I've farmed 15 years as a rogue farmer. I don't ever go in an FSA office. So they will not subsidize my crop insurance. So I go in to the crop insurance agent and I buy it unsubsidized. I pay $14 an acre. I get 55% revenue crop insurance. The problem is I don't have that hybrid farm savings account tax play to complement. So, out of cash, I would have to pay all my deductible. What I don't want crop insurance to go away. Actually, I want crop insurance to survive without subsidies. And by God, if you're a farmer that wants to pay $80 an acre to get 80% crop insurance, knock yourself out. Just don't take my tax dollars to subsidize your premium. And by the way, crop insurance, very expensive program. You think we spent a lot on this last bailout? By the time you do crop insurance subsidies and the administrative cost for crop insurance and the deficit that crop insurance runs, it's way over 22 million a year. So crop insurance is way more expensive and it never gets figured into the subsidies that farmers are receiving. So, let's get rid of the subsidies crop insurance, but I would like the government to make sure that a crop insurance system would exist, but at a true rate versus risk type of scenario where if you are going to produce corn and beans in the very most marginal row crop areas, then you're going to have a higher rate to pay than in the I states. So then that gets a cattle herd back.
And I've never sat down to eat a bowl of soybeans for supper. I love my beef though. I want more cows. We haven't even talked about dairy, but I do like dairy products from time to time too. But I really want cheaper ribeyes in the store.
Yeah.
Maybe
And,
one of these days. American grown ribeyes in the store. Let's be clear about that. I don't want Brazilian, Argentinian, Venezuelan, or wherever the heck it came. I want American grown ribeyes. They taste better. Everyone go buy an American grown cow and get some beef that way.
and that, like for my farm, the beef has carried us for the last 2 years through tough row crop times. And I kind of call that the Iowa model. I learned that along the way as a younger farmer, that I kind of say the Iowa model was always to have some diversity on your farm. The old timers would always say, when the crops can't make it, the pigs will, and when the pigs can't make it, the crops will. That's so true for what's happened to us here lately. The cattle have really carried the row crop, but it's not my fault that a lot of Midwest farms didn't keep some cattle around. You know, there's always places where the cow is better than the plow. Certain pieces of land on almost every farm I've been on, there's better places for the cow than the plow. But yet, I think some of our land grant economists have told you have to go for efficiency. Or when you become unidimensional in your production, you also become a little too dependent, in my opinion. There's where my editorial opinion comes in.
There you go. I like it. Well, we're pushing an hour now. Any other issues we need to tackle?
I'd say,
Last time I
um,
asked it, I came up with another one. So
yes, I guess, how do you, I want to give a brief uh, description of how for 15 years what you could do if you did go independent of government programs. And I'd say what I have found is number one, to contain risk. If you were to go rogue away from the government, one thing is we have to do is downsize to cash flow ability. Number two, get catastrophic insurance the best you can. Three, get a bit of cash reserve, and that's where I hope an HFSA could come into play. Four, you have to store your crop longer. Oh, hey, and I'm not doing this to sell grain bins, but
Good. I can afford to pay you to do this, but thanks.
no, I mean, what I find myself doing is going back to what I saw old timers do, is they keep the crop for a little bit longer. So I find myself storing about half my crop long enough to anticipate next year's production. So in essence, the grain bin becomes my crop insurance. And that's harder in the marginal fringe areas, I will admit. That's a harder thing to do because when a drought hits Iowa, the price of grains go up. When a drought hits, southern Ohio where I used to farm, no one gave a crap about it. Well, I will admit that can be hard to do. Okay, and then number 5 and the last one is diversify, going back to that last point, where if you have to put cattle, sheep, whatever, back into your operation, do it to help yourself get through the tough times. That's my 15-year experiment.
Is the USDA still flying spy planes over your place?
They quit that. And one thing that even the administrator of Iowa, because we went back and forth a little bit, she was really good and responsive, but she kept reminding me participation in these programs are voluntary. And that's so true. They haven't given me any duff. They just outcompete me for land and resources, but whatever. I'm fine at the size we're a legitimate entity at this size. So
So now they just fly over once a month now, not every day.
yeah, we don't know what they do in their office with the satellite imaging, though. That's what we don't know. But
They're phone the whole
and if I may say that also, I have a lot of this stuff is on the website. A lot of it's in my book, and I try to lay it out on the website that it's understandable. Also, if someone would need to contact me for what it's worth, it's agritopia.hfsa@gmail.com. So that's my email, agritopia.hfsa@gmail.com.
Awesome. And your website, agritopiabook.com.
Yeah, yes, thank you.
Great stuff there. So I think we got it all covered. Appreciate your time.
Yeah, I do too, Bailey, really do.
What's the weather there, by the way?
Today we're gonna hit somewhere in the 20s.
All right, well, go
It's
outside.
awesome.
It's 25 here. I'm enjoying it now. Compared to your weather, I enjoy it here. This is great.
Yeah, yeah, and then compared to North Dakota, I like it here.
Yeah, it's all relative. So, all right, appreciate the time. We'll do this again.
You betcha. Thank you.